This is the land of the peasant, the water buffalo, and the rice paddy. This is Vietnam. The division of Vietnam into North and South is purely artificial. The 28 million Vietnamese are one people. North of the 17th parallel, the communist government of Ho Chi Minh relentlessly plots and plans the overthrow of the government of South Vietnam President Diem. The free world Vietnamese in the South look forward to the day when the North will be liberated from the communist yoke. For 2,000 years, would-be conquerors have come to this land, the Chinese, the Mongols, and the French. The French came to what they called Indochina in the 19th century. In the mid-20th century, tens of thousands of French found their final resting place here. 19th century European imperialism ended in this part of the world in 1954. The French suffered their final humiliating defeat at Dien Bien Phu. Now the new 20th century imperialism seeks to conquer this land, the imperialism of communism. In South Vietnam, the agents of global communism are the Viet Cong, known locally as the VC. They are tough guerrilla fighters. Their tactics are sabotage, assassination, and terror. The 20,000 hardcore communist VC fighters control more than half of Vietnam. In some provinces, they control 90% of the land. They dominate the entire road network of the nation at night, most of the roads in daylight hours. Almost 7,000 American military personnel advise and support the free world South Vietnamese in the fight for the land. This weapon is called a ponji. It is perhaps 2,000 years old. The VC plant these spikes in ditches. Traditionally, infantry troops move along a road in single file on either side. When they receive small arms fire, they dive for the ditches. When the South Vietnamese troops hit the ditches, they hit the spikes. These spikes are impregnated with either urine or animal dung. They inflict not only a wound, but a guaranteed case of tetanus. That's one little fact that you must understand to know what's happening in South Vietnam. Regrettably, understanding a situation frequently entails the understanding of a lot of sometimes dull little facts. Here are a few. South Vietnam is divided militarily into 3 tactical zones or corps areas. First are I Corps in the north. Here the terrain has a tendency to be mountainous. Corps headquarters is at Da Nang. There are 2 divisions of Vietnamese Regular Army in I Corps. A 3rd division is forming. Second Corps headquarters is at Pleiku. The terrain here is plateau. 2 divisions in 2 corps, a 3rd forming. The busiest tactical zone is the southern 3 Corps area. The terrain is delta. Headquarters is in Saigon. There are 4 American helicopter companies in South Vietnam, 1 company each in I Corps and 2 Corps, 2 companies in 3 Corps. There are about 1,000 American military advisors in each tactical zone. The remaining 4,000 American military people are engaged in such support activities as flying and maintaining the helicopters or our headquarters personnel. The Vietnamese have a small tactical air force capable of bombing and strafing and a small navy for patrolling the coast and rivers. The Viet Cong communists terrorized the villages of South Vietnam. The government of President Diem has adopted the concept of the enclosed community. These enclosed communities are called strategic villages. The South Vietnam Master Plan calls for 8,000 strategic hamlets, fortified and protected hamlets, grouped within larger protected and fortified villages. On paper, there are 1,200 of these fortified hamlets, indicating the program would be about 15% complete. However, the number of truly fortified hamlets is probably considerably less than the announced number, and the total program is probably 5% complete. Most observers believe, nonetheless, that the strategic hamlet program may mark the turning point in the struggle against the Viet Cong.
The strategic hamlet is, I think, showing the effectiveness of civic action and military action. The strategic hamlet only is possible when the militaries protect the people, to permit them to construct the strategic hamlet, to construct or to organize the forces inside the strategic hamlet.
Strategic hamlet effort is known as Operation Sunrise. 20 miles northwest of Saigon is the district of Cu Chi. The district chief is Captain Bin. He's both a civil official and a military officer. He was wearing civilian clothes on the occasion of our visit. Captain Bin has the reputation of being a very effective VC fighter. He's also considered to be something of an administrator. This is the 8th district he's organized into strategic hamlets and waged an effective anti-VC effort. With the aid of charts and graphs, Captain Bin told us that when he came to this district 6 months ago, the government of President Diem controlled very little of Cu Chi, just some stretches of road in the daylight hours and 3 villages on those roads. The rest of the district was VC dominated. The district has an area of 39,000 acres. In it are 14 villages and 110 hamlets. In Vietnam, a group of hamlets comprise a village. There are 110,000 people living in Cu Chi district. Captain Bin is gradually moving these people into hamlets protected by defensive works, ditches, barbed wire, bamboo stockades laced with bamboo spears, upon which it is desired that the marauding VC impale themselves. In the flooded ditches are planted bamboo spikes. These will pierce the foot of the unwary. Hamlets so protected are grouped into villages. These villages, in turn, are protected by similar defensive works. We visited the hamlets of Cu Chi and Som Way. Within the hamlets and villages, normal or almost normal municipal services are rendered. There are community schools and pagodas. At Som Way, the VC not too long ago destroyed the Buddhist pagoda. The pagoda has been rebuilt. Captain Bin gets things done. From the protected hamlets, the peasants go forth daily to tend their rice paddies, to work on rubber plantations, to tend their fruits and vegetables. Fortified strong points are manned by members of Republican youth. These are young people who have received a certain amount of political indoctrination and military training from President Diem's government. The youngsters will pull perhaps 2 24-hour guard shifts a month. Each of the able-bodied men and women in the district is responsible for the construction of about 10 feet of the great trench and earthwork that surrounds the district. Captain Bin supervises programs in his district for the rehabilitation of disenchanted VC and VC sympathizers. He has a secret police, a civil guard constabulary, roughly comparable to militia on active duty. There is a civil action group concerned with the political education of the community. In practice, the work of the civic action people probably consists of explaining to the people what must be done and when and where they're going to do it. There is a Ministry of Health concerned with various public health programs, including malaria eradication. For anti-VC operations under local control, Captain Bin has at his disposal 1 company of regular Army Rangers. There are Self-Defense Corps people responsible for the local defense of the villages and hamlets. These self-defense people have received some basic military training. They do not leave their villages. With all these military and non-military programs in progress, Captain Bin has high hopes of having his district 100% VC-free by the end of the year. Bin told us there had been no VC attacks on his district recently, but just to be on the safe side, Captain Bin had a truckload of armed soldiers follow us wherever we went. We talked to a group of workers who were planting a grove of mango trees. They told us that not too long ago, the VC had made them dig hundreds of yards of escape holes, tunnels, and caves. The VC used these as escape routes. We learned that 6 miles of these tunnels had been dug in Cu Chi district. When attacked by government troops, the VC had just seemed to vanish into thin air. But they were not vanishing into thin air, they were vanishing into the holes. Now the tunnels and caves have been flooded. The entrances and exits have been caved in. We asked one old man where his rice paddy and water buffalo were. He said he did not have these because he was a blacksmith. Thereupon one young fellow proudly announced he had 7 water buffalo, enough so that he could rent them out to the other peasants. The Viet Cong had told these people that the Americans were imperialists and that President Diem was a puppet of the American imperialists. Around one group of villages and hamlets, Captain Bin has constructed a defensive perimeter of about 12 miles circumference. Within the protection of the perimeter live 2,700 families. Within this enclosure, Captain Bin has created sort of a housing tract. Each family is given a plot of land about 25 by 50 yards upon which to build a home. The children take care of the babies. Mama and Papa build the homes and fortifications and work the fields, all trying to build a free life in a land free of the communist Viet Cong. Here in Cu Chi, they seem to be winning, but Cu Chi is a showpiece. It will be at least 2 years before we know for sure whether Operation Sunrise is winning the big battle to separate the VC from the peasants upon whom they live, from whom they take rice and girls and young men for their forces. Captured communist Viet Cong soldiers are always asked by the intelligence people who interrogate them what it is that they fear most. Invariably, they reply the helicopters. American helicopters flown by American pilots lift Vietnamese troops where the areas of concentration of VC forces are known to exist. When the VC are not killed, wounded, or captured, this vertical envelopment tactic at the very least ensures the VC a good run in the hot sun. There's reason to believe that this form of exercise is making them a little weary. We visited the forward command post of Province Chief Major To in the Mito area, about 42 miles southwest of Saigon. Major To is a very tall man for a Vietnamese and quite handsome. He was employing 6 companies of the Vietnamese 7th Infantry Division in an attack upon an estimated 2 platoons of Viet Cong. Major To, about 7 in the morning, had sent a convoy of trucks down a road near where the VC were thought to be. The trucks were bait. It was hoped the VC would attack them. They did. Major To had earlier deployed 3 companies of his force as a blocking or holding force. He wanted to drive the VC into these troops using his helicopter-lifted troops as the drivers. The major was chopper lifting 1 company at a time, dropping each company into a position forming one side of a box. The plan called for trapping the VC inside a square measuring 6 kilometers on a side. The Chief of Staff of the 7th Infantry Division, Lieutenant Colonel Dom, visited Major To, CP, to check on the progress of the operation. Colonel Dom is a graduate of the United States Army's Command and Staff School at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. The operation appeared to be going well when an American advisor reported the lead helicopter in the formation deploying the last company had received 3 rounds of small arms fire from the ground. The lead chopper dropped out of the formation. The next chopper pilot in line was not precisely sure of the drop zone. He missed it by about 3,000 or 4,000 yards. This left the VC a small escape hatch. They found the hole and disappeared into the rice paddies. 50 VC escaped, but 11 were killed, 4 captured, and 7 weapons were captured. The Republic of Vietnam forces suffered no casualties in the action. For them, a cool ride in the helicopters, a walk in the hot sun, a brief firefight, and a minor victory. Said Major To, the VC fooled me today. Next time I plan a little better. Next time I get them all.
The Vietnamese officer, when he's trained, when he has good training, becomes a good leader. Leadership, of course, is a difficult thing to develop, and as you know, this country has only has its independence since 1954. For this reason, the leadership is not as well as advanced as it is in our own country. And this will take time, but we're working on improving the leadership of the officers and their non-commissioned officers.
American officers in South Vietnam describe the commander of the Vietnamese 7th Infantry Division, Colonel Cao, as a fine commander of troops and an effective anti-VC fighter. Colonel Cao is 35 years old, young for a division commander. We commented that the colonel's rise had been rapid. He replied, "This is a rapid war. The colonel's sector is one of the hottest. The VC are most active, and the colonel probably mounts more anti-VC operations than any other division commander. Kyle thinks VC activity is starting to decrease in his sector. He says, surely we are winning. We are discouraging the VC who are not yet thoroughly indoctrinated. 6 months ago, the people in the villages were discouraged. Now they seem to have more faith in President Diem. Colonel Kyle is rather non-committal on the Strategic Hamlet program. He simply says, it is the announced policy of my government. I have no comment. We'll have to wait and see how effective it will be. I find the VC squad and platoon leaders good, says Kyle. These are hardcore VC. They are always communists. The colonel doesn't think the individual VC soldier is so tough, although he finds their physical courage good. Kyle told us VC soldiers have been ordered to die in the fight if need be, and that they will stand and fight to the death. Kyle thinks the defeat of the VC will take time and require a continuing, relentless military offensive, paralleled by social and economic reforms. Kyle does not believe a military victory in isolation is possible. Colonel Kyle wants more helicopters. He thinks the M1 rifle and the BAR are too big for the average Vietnamese soldier. In his division, Kyle says the relationship between the Vietnamese officers and the American advisors is good. On occasion, Kyle says he must be a diplomat. His operations officer and the American advisor will prepare different plans for the same operation. When this happens, Kyle must make his decision in such a way as to save face all the way round. Kyle left us with a parting shot that was a little startling. He said he had reliable intelligence reports of VC troop concentrations in battalion strength and more, and VC supply depots in the Plan de Jong, next to the Cambodian border. The Plan de Jong is also known as the Plain of Reeds. The reeds are higher than a man's head. The battalion can hide in the reeds and not be seen. It's a difficult country in which to fight a war. Plan de Jong is about 100 miles south and west of Saigon. Colonel Kyle plans to chase the VC right into Cambodia if necessary. Kyle says he'll chase the VC until he catches them, and then he will destroy them. We visited the forward command post of the Assistant Division Commander of the 2nd ARVN Infantry Division. ARVN means Army of the Republic of Vietnam. The 2nd Division is in the northern 1st or I Corps area. Lieutenant Colonel Hugh was winding up an anti-VC operation. His force was a reinforced battalion. His CP had been attacked the night before by a VC platoon. Hugh has 40 men to provide for the protection of his CP. To make up for the light security force, Hugh moves his CP every day or so. Hugh's forward listening post received the initial assault. One VC was killed, possibly the platoon leader. The slain VC was armed with an American carbine. He was carrying the Viet Cong flag of liberation, half red, half light blue, with a yellow star on the center. He was going to make a present of these to the division's American advisor, Lieutenant Colonel Engen. Our party was accompanied by Major Jackson, American advisor to the Ranger Battalion making the attack for Colonel Hugh, and by Captain Mitchell, the American advisor to the division intelligence officer. Colonel Hugh, by the way, is a graduate of the Command and Staff School at Fort Leavenworth. When Hugh's listening post repulsed the first VC attack, which was about in squad strength, the VC withdrew. The colonel laid fire from his 105 howitzers on the VC position. The VC replied with 4 rounds of counter-battery fire from 60-millimeter mortars. Captain Mitchell was interested in the mortar fragments. These will be analyzed to determine the country from whence the ammunition came. This attack may have seen the first use of a new VC tactic, at least in this part of the country. Heretofore, the VC had not been known to use mortars with units as small as the platoon. Colonel Hugh's regular troops are employed most of the time in the occupation of outpost positions. For operations of any size, he must borrow troops from his corps commander, such as the Ranger Battalion he was currently using. That Ranger Battalion was in the midst of a training cycle. Of course, their training was interrupted. Colonel Hugh's operation was not a success. The door had been left open and the VC vanished through it. A sizable fraction of ARVN forces are not available for combat operations because they're going to school somewhere. Another sizable fraction occupy outpost positions. These outposts are now called operations bases. The change in name is an attempt to suggest to the Vietnamese that it would be a good idea to mount operations out of them. Some commanders do, and some don't. The French tried to win a war here, occupying strongly fortified positions. You may remember they lost. Colonel Hugh's attack did yield a few VC suspects. One woman said her husband was a VC, but she was through with him. She was going to marry another man very soon now. One suspect told the interrogating officer that all that shooting in the rice paddies was a big nuisance. It frightens the water buffalo and they run off. When it's time to plow the rice paddies, a man needs his water buffalo. That remark raised an interesting question. What is the interest of the Vietnamese peasant in all this? His primary loyalty is to his rice paddy and to the ground in which his ancestors are buried. The strength of this attachment is difficult for an urban American to imagine. The peasant has a tendency to adjust to the authority that exists in his village, be that authority Communist Viet Cong or the government of President Diem. He wants to be left alone in his village. Now it seems more and more villagers are turning in the VC in their midst. The more secure and protected they are in their villages, the more readily they turn in the VC. This is understandable. If a village chief without weapons and a minimum self-defense force were to turn in a VC, he would lose his head in the middle of the night. The commander of American forces in South Vietnam and Thailand is 4-star General Paul Harkins, one-time cavalry officer. General Harkins served on the staff of General George Patton in World War II. He saw service in Korea during the unpleasantness there. We wore two hats when we called on General Harkins. We were acting as agents for Nebraska Governor Frank Morrison and Omaha Mayor Jim Dworick. We commissioned General Harkins a full admiral in the great Navy of the state of Nebraska, and we made the general an honorary citizen of Omaha and presented him with the key to the city. We also, in our capacity as newsmen, had some questions for the general. We wanted to know whether we were winning or losing in South Vietnam. Said Harkins, "We're not losing." The general detected no recent increase in VC activity, nor did he detect any decrease. He could fix no point in time when it might be possible for the United States to conclude its military advisory and assistance programs in South Vietnam.
It isn't something that's going to end tomorrow or next week or next month. It's going on for some time.
Sir, everywhere we've gone in South Vietnam, both American and South Vietnamese officers tell us that they could use more helicopters. Is there any possibility of more helicopters in the relatively near future?
Well, I've got their reports, and we're working on it. We hope we can bring in some more if we feel we need them, and I'm sure we could use them.
General Harkins, why does the individual Viet Cong soldier fight? What motivates him?
Well, I guess it's the motivation that is behind all the communists. It's the indoctrination they give them from birth on up. It's very, very rigid and rugged indoctrination.
Sir, is he a good soldier?
He's a fine soldier, a very good field soldier, a very hard soldier to fight.
Can you tell us a bit about the current VC tactics? What seem to be their objectives?
Well, their objective, I think, is to, in this area, is to get control of South Vietnam, which the South Vietnamese are not going to let them do.
What effect, sir, do you think the strategic Hamlet program will have on the military situation here in Vietnam?
Well, it's separating the people from the VC, and it's going to make the VC come and to the villages to get their food, their taxes, and everything else, and it's going to make the VC attack rather than just have us go out and find them. They're going to have to come to the villages to get their things.
Thank you, General Harkins.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being a member of the great Nebraska Navy and also having a key to the city of Omaha, and also from the mayor to be an honorary citizen. I have a warm spot in my heart for Omaha. I used to ride in the Oxar Bend show years ago, and I must say the people of Omaha are very, very gracious to all of us who came up there and participated. Thank you much. Hope you've had a good stay here.
It is fashionable for American journalists to go to South Vietnam for a short stay and then to come home and write long pieces of penetrating analysis. We went to South Vietnam for 3 weeks, a short stay. In this series, we're attempting to report to you only what we saw and heard. We hope to offer enough facts so that you will be able to analyze what is happening in Vietnam for yourself.